48-hour art check, round 60. Right.
All right.
Here we are again.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, I was just getting the last little bit there so we could see the chat, if anybody's in the chat, which nobody is right now. So yeah, 60 of these, man. That's a ton.
Yeah, that's nuts. And it's weird because it doesn't, I mean, it does feel like we've been doing them for a while, but it doesn't feel like 60 episodes. I think it's because we're doing them so often.
Right, yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
It's pretty strange. It's kind of weird to think that we do 3 of these a week because none of them are ever 15 minutes. as much as we try to make them 15 minutes, they have never been 15 minutes ever. I think maybe once.
Let's aim for it today. Let's shoot for 15.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I think you started last time. I can't remember.
Yep.
Okay, you started last time, so I'll start this time. So let me load this up. There we go. So this is basically what I've gotten done. This video is timed to 30 seconds. So I got Tinkerbell, Yoda. Most of those guys I had already done. A few of these guys I hadn't. Got some pencils in as well. So I actually have 10 characters and the background of about a third of the page. Pretty close to done, but not completely all the way there. So I'm still going to work in some of the rocks and stuff like that. But the background's coming in. It's a little frustrating with some of this stuff, but yeah. So how about you?
That looks awesome, by the way. So I finished the tight pencils for my page and am now moving on to the inking stage. So I've done the panel borders and the text, and next I'm going to be working on inking panel 1 tonight. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, awesome.
I'd rather be drawing in the chats just said happy 60th, you old bastards.
And because he said that, I had to approve that comment before it went live. So, yeah, challenges for me, just my brain working against me in weird anxiety cycles and stuff for very little reasons. But you just get in your head, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. So, but I think I'll be fine.
Yeah, it's funny. I relate to those coming up. I think it's kind of like the artistic brain. We're so analytical of kind of the world around us and kind of empathetic to people. I think a lot of the time because we're writing other characters and getting in other people's heads, like in writing, and that can kind of translate to some weird anxieties and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, for me, it's just fighting that stupid infection, man. It's just lingering.
Yeah. Plans for me are going to be a little bit different. I am going to LA tomorrow, and so I don't know how much I'll be able to get done. But I'm planning on packing this up. I actually bought a special bag that will help me carry this as a carry-on because my normal man purse doesn't really fit it. And so my main plans is just to get a couple more characters done while on the road. So I'll be going mobile again.
That's awesome, and hopefully we can meet up while you're in LA. The weather's great, so enjoy that while you're here.
Yes.
Yeah, my plans are to hopefully at minimum I'd like to have 2 more panels inked by the next time we have one of these. So that's the minimum. I think I can probably get at least 3, but we'll see.
Yeah. I'd rather be drawing asks, are everyone's brain infections over? And no. Unfortunately, mine will be that way for a while. So if you missed last episode, I have weird things going on in my ears. that are no longer painful. So at least they're not painful. But yeah, I am a little concerned about flying with pressure changes and stuff. But I think it'll be all right. But yeah, so no, I'll probably be. Doctor says best case scenario, I'll be dealing with this for the next month at the minimum. So it's with me for the foreseeable future.
Man,
yeah. So
that's rough.
Do you want to talk about anxiety and art? I think that's kind of an interesting topic. So
yeah,
I never had anxiety or depression until I started to draw, and I don't know how much those things are related because I also have been in a number of car accidents, and like when I say a number, I mean in the teens of car accidents, and I've also had 3 falls over 30 feet without any like speed reduction, no assistance, right? Call it unassisted falls. And so like I went. Long story short, I was on my bicycle and I was hit by a car, and then while I was going to the chiropractor to fix everything that happened with that, couldn't walk. It messed up my knee pretty bad. I was rear-ended about 3 weeks later and got whiplash, and that my chiropractor, after looking at the x-rays and having me describe in detail my physical history, he said, you realize you shouldn't be, 1, you shouldn't be here, 2, it's actually amazing that you walk and move and aren't really messed up. Anyway, soft tissue damage from that, probably compounded among other things, actually triggered this really weird summer where I just had a lot of anxiety like all summer. It was really interesting. It was also the same summer that I started drawing The Mixed, which is the comic book that kind of got me into drawing. And so I don't know, I did take a bunch of like fish oil stuff, which is supposed to like help regenerate neurological things. It helps with like the myelin sheaths that go along the whatever. And so I was able to get out of like constant anxiety. But ever since then, I've had occasional, and I don't know what I call them attacks, but I've had occasional bouts of anxiety where I just kind of get in my own head, and I wonder how much of that is that you have to be really empathetic with art and storytelling, and you have to be very comfortable with being very vulnerable publicly, working really hard on something and putting it out there, and kind of opening yourself up to that. And I wonder how much of that is tied into it, and because I wasn't doing that before, if it wasn't there, or if it's soft tissue damage and it's just going to happen whether I'm doing art or not. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I don't experience anxiety like to the level that, like people in my family do. And actually, if you guys are curious about like kind of the nitty gritty details on that kind of stuff, you can actually read my comic. It kind of deals with anxiety and some of the effects and kind of an analysis of what like panic disorder is and stuff like that. But I do get bouts of anxiety, and I think part of it is usually socially. And so I think I do think it's connected to art a little bit. I think because of the fact that art is it's kind of a risky venture.
Yeah.
It can lead to a lot of anxiety. Like I don't think there are a ton of fields where you're literally putting yourself out there. Oh, well, I shouldn't say literally, but it feels literal.
Right.
It feels so literal that it makes me misuse literal, which is one of my pet peeves.
And it also opens you up to an interesting situation because many occupations, most occupations, I would say, you're not in a situation where the public feels very comfortable critiquing your job, like what you do
Yeah.
for a living. Like as an accountant, I can't look at an accountant's work and say, "Boy, you're not a very good accountant," and publicly flame you on Twitter because I feel like you used an equation differently than a different accountant or whatever. Whereas because everyone consumes entertainment and because art is often comes in a form of entertainment, everyone feels licensed to tear things to shreds that are people's livelihoods, and it's a really weird situation, I think.
Yeah, and it's not quite as black and white as a lot of careers. Like, if you're working in food service, you know pretty quickly like whether somebody enjoys the food or not.
Right.
You know, if you're working, in customer service, it's still like a lot of the time there's like a checklist and kind of a kind of black and white way of viewing things. And with art, you're really dipping into the gray because, like, as we've discussed on this before, like, and I don't ever really want us to get too heavily into the topic of like what is art, because that in itself is like a really ambiguous thing. And so, so the fact that it's kind of ambiguous, it's like you're wading out into this ambiguous territory. And then aside from that, like you're really, um, uh, it's weird. It's like you're kind of putting there's more risk.
Yeah.
It's and the risk isn't so much financial risk, although that's involved, but it's more of an emotional risk, and that's and with creator owned properties and stuff like that, that's amplified
Right.
exponentially, because you're literally like you're putting out something that you think is worthwhile, that you've invested a lot of time in, and you're kind of putting yourself at the mercy of the court.
Yeah.
The court of public opinion. And that, there are a few fields like that. Like I'd imagine comedians are probably in a similar boat.
Yeah. I've tried that before, and I did very well my first two sets, and I bombed my third set, and that was the last time I ever did that.
That's how bad
oh my
the
gosh,
bombing can feel.
It is legit real. I mean, you are up there and you are just on display, and everyone in the room that is looking directly at you knows you are failing, and you know you're failing, and there's very little you can do about it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's another thing. There's another thing about this that I want to point out. There's kind of several myths that come around art, and I want to kind of state, I don't think that anxiety and depression is required for art, and I don't think that it is always attached to it. Just like I don't believe the myth of the starving artist. I do believe that there are correlations between those things. I think that our economy is not set up currently to handle creatives well. And so I think there are a lot of things that people do in the creative fields that are lower paying, and that's real, right? But buying into that as a given is super problematic. The other side of it is buying into, I'm an artist, so I have to suffer for my art. I don't believe that is true. I do believe that you should be comfortable with being vulnerable, but I don't think that suffering is required or part of art.
And I would say like that having that kind of mindset of like suffering being required for art, or like art being something that you're purely doing for just fun or something, leads to a lot of really dangerous things, like the misconception of a client that like, well, you're having a good time with this, so we can underpay you.
Yeah.
Um,
or you're suffering, so you're a predisposed victim, so I can prey on that.
Yeah, and I think I mean it's definitely important to understand that that's a lot of artists I know do have like anxiety and depression and stuff like that for some of the reasons that we just barely kind of touched on.
Yeah.
But that that doesn't mean all artists therefore are that way. And by no means should we ever, especially like when dealing with like commercial art, like we should always kind of treat it like a business,
Right.
and not not be too personal with it, because it, you know, it is business and it is commerce, and especially in the sense of doing commercial art.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tough one, because I think there are certain personalities that tend to be drawn to the creative fields, and those personalities, you know, in my experience, like it, you know, there's a certain personality that kind of continues drawing when, you know, like when you're a kid and all the kids are kind of doing certain things, there's a certain personality that kind of sticks to their drawing table when it starts getting tough.
Right.
And that doesn't mean it's the same personality all the time, but I can definitely say there's a lot of that within art. And I think getting comfortable with it, and not only getting comfortable with it, but recognizing, you know, we'll probably have to keep this one's relatively short. I don't want to dig in too deep. Maybe we can continue this one next time.
Yeah.
But I do think there are certain telltale kind of signs you can look for, where you can kind of recognize what is anxiety or other kind of mental illnesses, and what is yourself, like when you're thinking about projects and stuff like that. And I have a few like little checklist questions I'll ask myself, you know, if I'm ever kind of curious, like, is this anxiety or is this like rational, like, fear, you know?
Yeah, is this a real thing I should pay attention to, or is this something I should try to work through or ignore?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And there's also that fear of like, if I try to fix this, is it going to kill, you know, that something special that I think I might have that's helping me? Here's an interesting comment. Scott in the chat is saying, that's crazy that you guys are talking about this. The anxiety monster has been nipping at my heels lately. My first attack happened at 29 when I gave up art to become responsible and crap. And that's a super interesting comment, because I actually really relate to that in the inverse, in that my path to illustration is weird, because I really started taking it seriously at 32, whereas most people are kind of there, you know, or whatever. I drew a little bit in grade school, and then I went into graphic design because it felt like safer or whatever. But I kind of lost myself, and I really I hate the whole lost myself, found myself thing, but I really felt like I started being authentic to who I am when I started drawing again. And so I do feel like there is a certain level of authenticity with creation. And I don't think that everybody should or is called to create in the same way. And I think when you're trying to create in a way that is inauthentic to how you feel called, or, you know, what feels right for you, or however you want to describe that kind of internal clock, that you're going to get some cognitive dissonance. You're going to get some disassociation of identity, you know, with what it is that you're producing, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
It's just kind of an interesting thought.
Yeah, I think I tend to think if you feel like you're put on this earth to do something and then you're not doing that thing, inevitably it leads to all sorts of identity crises.
Right.
Because, you know, if you feel like your calling is to do some certain thing, then to kind of ignore that or go against it, it's almost like going against your own body. It's
right.
very, very weird. And I do remember like my first 2 years of being an art director. I've talked about this a little bit, but it's you know, when my son was really young, I focused mostly on just kind of figuring out what the heck I was doing, because I had never really managed people. I had managed classrooms, and that's a totally different game. It's similar, but it's different. You know,
right.
like when there's a different politics to what I do, and a different kind of morale mindset where you have to kind of focus on people's morales and like figuring out how to get voluntary compliance, which is like really weird. And it's a riddle that I don't think anyone's really fully figured out.
Right.
But anyhow, so I got lost in that riddle, and I remember 2 years in, catching myself, being really unmotivated in what I was doing in my personal job, because I was mostly doing graphic design or illustration for other people at that job, and that was my art output. And the second I kind of pinned it down and realized like it's one of those things of like I actually have to be working on what I'm working to be any good at anything I'm doing.
Right.
Because this, it like kind of feeds into itself. So like having a creative output for myself, like an outlet, allows me to have kind of the steam and the motivation when it comes to doing commercial work. Because if I'm not engaged personally in art, my type of personality tends to get really disengaged when it comes to commercial art, because it's not as personal,
right,
by nature of it being someone else telling you, hey, draw this. If the thing that if you're not in that mindset where you like if money weren't involved, you'd be drawing. It's hard to kind of retain. At least for me, it was really hard to retain like an appreciation and a passion for what I was doing. So like the second I started working on personal projects again, some other anxieties came up, which are it's a lot safer to have someone tell you what to draw and
right.
you draw it, because you have a clear marker. And so it's like, okay, you can know, once again, kind of similar to what we were describing, you can know whether you've succeeded or not.
Right. When there's a client involved, your metrics for success are really easy. The client satisfaction, you get a paycheck. But when it's a personal project, I find it incredibly difficult to define success in any real definitive way. Like, for example, my book. I finished this book. I will continue to try to get it published. But right now it is sitting in a state of done. There's nothing else creatively that I can do to it, and it's a lot of waiting while I'm starting other projects. I still maintain that it's a success because I completed it. I completed 40 hand-inked pages.
Yeah.
But it's a different type of success than, somebody gives you $3,000 for a couple weeks worth of work, and they're happy and you're happy, and then you move on. And you don't think about that again, except for maybe show it in your portfolio or something.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really hit home for me when returning to making personal projects was the fact that, like, when I think back on my career, the stuff I think back on with pride, and like really vividly remember in my growth as an artist, very rarely is that time that I finally landed Scholastic. That time felt good, and I remember that. But the art, I frankly, like, I barely remember.
Yeah.
And but I really vividly remember my first comic and getting that published and getting it out there, which was way less lucrative short term.
Sure.
But it does mean something. The weight of it's a little different. So yeah, this is actually a really good topic. We should definitely carry this over into like another art check, I think, because it's good, man.
We'll put it on the list.
All right. So, well, Scott, thank you for joining us in the chats, and check out Scott's stuff. I'd rather be drawing on social media. I think he goes by that. But
definitely on YouTube, and I think I've seen him. I think that's what he goes by on other Facebook as well.
Yeah.
I will say this really quick, because this has been helpful in case this helps somebody else. The beautiful mind situation. A lot of my anxiety stems from imposter syndrome, which is a whole other thing. But as soon as you can name it and maybe this is for future episodes, as soon as you can recognize and identify it, if I can tag those thoughts and feelings as something other than me, anxiety or whatever, it doesn't make them go away, but it does strip them of some of their power and makes it much more manageable. That may be an interesting topic for future episodes.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to fight the enemy you know than the enemy you don't.
Right.
And so, like, that's why force of nature villains can be, if they're written well, really frightening. Because a force of nature villain is like, you can't fight a tornado. You know, like you can prepare a little bit, but you're pretty much like, you're gonna go through it, and it's gonna come, and there's not really much you can do to kind of prevent it. Whereas, like, if it's Darth Vader, or like a villain that you know their motivations and stuff like that, then it's scary, but it's not as scary because there are certain tactics you can use to kind of defeat it.
Yeah.
So I'd say the same, with anxiety or depression. Like, depression's my big guy that I always have to look out for. And that's one of those things of, like, I know those intro questions that depression asks that try to get you into the deep pit, and being able to just kind of go, oh, I know this guy, like, but yeah, that's actually I think that might be a good place to kind of, that's a good tip. That would be definitely the start of how I deal and cope with that kind of thing as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So till future episodes, and the next time you see us, we will likely be in the same room, which will be a first. I don't think we've never met in person. That's awesome. Yeah. So that'll be fun. And if you want to check out my work, you can go to corykerr.com. If you haven't signed up for my email newsletter, go to corykerr.com/email. I'll be sending one out in the next couple days. I'll probably write it on the plane tomorrow. Special thanks to No Saboteurs for licensing the intro music. You can check their stuff out on facebook.com/No Saboteurs. And as always, you can find Josh Kemble's stuff at quarterlystories.com. And if you would like to know a very real and authentic way, kind of a viewpoint into mental illness and faith, and an interesting autobio thing, seriously check that out. Like, I don't know that there's a better episode to plug Josh's comic right now than this one. But it is one of the most real things I've read, having gone through several different characters in that I can relate to, and it's written very, very well. So go check that out at quarterlystories.com, and we will see you guys in a couple days.
Awesome. See you guys.